the original work of the autobiographical novel 10 Years of Marriage by Su Qing, a female writer in the Republic of China. Chapter 4. The so-called career. That night, I went to see Lu Sichen again. He told me about Zhu Guanglai, the president of Zhang newspaper. He is said to be quite loyal and enthusiastic. Have you ever been a deputy commander before? Now that I have lost my official position, I am now full of complaints. A series of articles mourning the king were published in Zhang newspaper. He couldn't help but feel moved when I heard Ethan's stupidest wife is dead. What does it have to do with me? So I was busy thinking about it secretly. Pretending to be cold, he said to Lu Sichen, Zhu is quite dashing. Be the president of a newspaper. He's afraid there's no big future either. Lu Sichen rolled her eyes. He answered me with his mouth curled up. That's already amazing. The sales of Zhang newspaper are very good. The background strength is sufficient. How can one person do this? Not easy. Often say that one should not be too wise. Pan Zimai is a good example. He is a young man went to do big things at every turn. The result is often thankless. It can be said that some cleverness harmed him. He is still unsure. I told him about the subsequent contact process. Pan Zimai agreed and Trotis Mego find the director of the screenwriting team of China Film Company Wei Shenji want to go see Mr. Wei tomorrow morning. Ji told him excitedly. His face is gloomy. He's fixed on me. It's like I can't say anything, but it seems like I have to say a few words. She looked at me in a low voice and said, go find him and find something to do. As long as you can survive. That's finino is not the time to start a career at Aliu or a woman again. Unfortunately, I got divorced during this period. Why after a while he suddenly remembered something again. Just tell Methan Ziguanglai from DJI News. He also told me yesterday or wants to ask you to be an editor, maybe a supplementee. Don't know if you are willing or not. I was so excited after hearing Thesa housewife like me after a few years of ordinary kitchen lafindering society for the first time. No, he is actually favored by everyone. That Ziguanglai was a former official. She is also pretty and is a real senior studying in the United States. I never thought he would take a fancy to me. He quickly appreciated my articulatus. It really for my article? I suddenly felt my heart be a tingy. Asked Lu Sicunis. DJI's treatment very good. Lu Sichen pondered for a long time, replied that we could talk to him about the treatment, ask him for some help, but their newspaper has an editor-in-chief whose surname is Qing called Qian Yingjun. This person is not easy to get along with. I am quite familiar with him originally. I also wanted to join the Zhang newspaper. Zhu Guanglai has told me many times. That's Mr. Kiev also met Hink about it carefully. Laderick and handsome and Sidefrians are too familiar. Being together makes things easier. So I decided not to go. I'm thinking about you. Speaking of which, he continued resolutely, since Pan Zimai has agreed to introduce Wei Rushing to you, there must be a way. The Chinese film companies cannot help but bring some color, but it is a commercial organization after all. In all, it's better than working in a newspaper office. I feel very disappointed, but he had to reluctantly nod. I often think about Zhu Guanglai's sad facade. Next day I went to find Wei Rusheng in a film company at my G Rodi. Am holding the letter of introduction that Pan Zimai sent early in the morning. Walked to Lanzian Road alone to catch the tram. Reach the end first and go to my G Road. The road is open. There are bald trees on both sides. Just looking at it makes you feel depressed. It's late. Autumn winter is coming soon. A very own wants to celebrate the new year happily. Hat will I adore you. Staying at your uncle's house for the new year. Thinking about it. Arrive at Agerwood Garden. Semicircular in front. A signboard with white characters on a black background hangs high. China Film Co. Ltd. inscription. I walked in bold. Ask where the writing team is. The person who closed the door told me. So I walked through the winding road. All the vegetation is yellow and falling clutter and messy. Was thinking to myself, this seems to be a dilapidated and abandoned temple. It's like a decaying home. I don't care about anything because of you. Where is the new and prosperous atmosphere? The screenwriting team's office is a rectangular room in the right side of the stairs. He went up and knocked on the door. A gentleman came and opened it for me. Is there a Mr. Wei Rushing here? I asked, slightly embarrassed, heart pounding. He didn't have time to answer. He saw the desk next to the window. There is a middle-aged man with a square face and thick eyebrows. Where you are from? Me suddenly heard as if he had been insulted. It's like he did something wrong. Secret little timid to think of resistingi. A person named Panmer. Pan Zimai introduced me. Harim, thinking about your answer, head straight to the chest. He dare not look up for a long time. Pan Zimi, he seemed to be showing contempt. Did you come to see Director Wei? Who are you? He gently replied that my surname is Sooth. Gentle gentleman who opened the door for me at this time. It seems I can't stand it anymore. He softly said to me, Missa, please sit down for a while. Director Wei hasn't come yet, but he's coming soon. I nodded gratefully. There are no empty seats in the office. I stood at the door, not knowing what to do. It was the same person who brought me into the office. I go into the room. Inside there is a large writing desk and sofa coffee table. I picked up a single sofa and sat down, politely said sorry, please wait a moment, then went to no. This is the directorates. Wei Rushengyi is a 48-year-old Guangdong man. Yesterday I seemed to hear Pan Zimai talking about him, still a human being who has never been married. It's him who looks down on women all over the world or don't have a hug for sad people. He may be a philanderer. Maybe my body is too weak, requires long-term maintenance. Maybe I should concentrate on studying knowledge. He can be a director. Her knowledge should not be without foundation, right? Just thinking about it, I just heard a commotion in the office outside. It seems like someone walked in. A very own greeted him respectfully, but he doesn't know much about Plephenally. The door to the director's office opened. A stupid figure, fat head and bigger, a thick man with a purple sugar complexion rushing in with high spirits. He can't help but be surprised. Guess he must be the so-called director Wei. Why is it so surprising to me? I think of myself as a woman. There was no need to stand up. But then I almost became his subordinate. You can't go wrong by being polite and respectful. I had no choice but to lean on the coffee table and bow to him. Unexpectedly, he looked at me proudly, didn't pay any attention to itself. Managai sat down at the big desk to read the documents. I feel very embarrassed. Almost cry. A woman sits in a strange room. Can it be? You see a man coming in, caught a glimpse of him. Said Soku, who was overjoyed, ran over, attentive, and he said a lot of compliments without any good intentions. What else does this mean? It's a huge insult. He looks down on me. Zimai is so unpredictable. Why should I sit here and be embarrassed? Would rather run out and be a beggar screenwriting director of what film company? Pooh, no matter how poor I am, I don't want an ugly old bachelor like you. Let's see what else you can do to build a tofu stand. He must have wanted to get up angrily and walk outside, but I saw a beautiful body flashing in outside. The one who opened the door for me. It seemed strange for him to see me sitting there without thinking. Then I understood it as soon as I thought about it. So he walked in beside me. He whispered that this is Director Wei. I'll introduce it to you. Talking, he calmly walked to the great fairy stage and asked the director. This Miss Su was Mr. Pan Zimai, who introduced me to see you. Director Wei still glanced at me absent-mindedly. I had no choice but to swallow my anger. Hand him the letter of introduction Pan Zimai gave me. He seemed to have looked at it several times very carefully. Then he whined twice and spoke to me. He said there are quite a few people on the screenwriting team here, but since you are willing to help, we are also very welcome. Have you ever written a screenplay before? I simply replied, no. My surname is Tank. The gentle young man suddenly introduced himself. Then he said, Miss Sui, have also read your article. That's a good script, not difficult, just know some special skills. Director Wei nodded impatiently and said, not bad, not bad. Miss Su, I think you can complete the procedures for coming in for service. Today go to the personnel department to get a staff card. Let's start working like this. This also surprised me. I didn't expect Wei Rushing to be so cheerful. Fortunately, I didn't leave in anger just now, otherwise, wouldn't it be a missed opportunity? There are 4 people in the office. The gentle one is Tang Zuan. He turns out to be versatile of painting and music. Clothes, shoes and socks are extremely clean. A face as delicate as a woman's. Speaking opera he studied was also in Kinji Peerly and round, singing very well as for the middle-aged man with thick eyebrows. His name is Lu Qing. Have been in the film industry for a long time. Now China film companies script, almost most of them were adapted or written by Heimel. Directors are familiar with Heim originally. Manager Wang wanted to ask him to be the director of this group just because Wei Rushing is from the propaganda department. In order to extend its power, the propaganda departmento, the flagship of the film industry after the reorganization of China Film Company, insist on building him. Manager Wang dare not fail to make appropriate arrangements for him. So I made him the director of the screenwriting team. In fact, he knows nothing about movies and dramas. Of course, Lu Kui hated and looked down on him. Manager Wang later listened to Lu Kui's words. He also know that he is incompetent. He don't want to adopt his opinions on the script at all. There is also a lanky young man in the office. His name is Sun. He is actually a literary theorist, loves to talk about the principles of drama development process, history, etc. But the mouth can speak, but the hands cannot act. Don't tell me that he can't act in the script he wrote. Even just looking at it is boring. Wei Rushing took the old gift just because of Sun. In fact, he was a student. He taught in a certain middle school in the past. so he was invited to serve as screenwriter. Don't even ask what he thinks of what he wrote. Therefore, everyone is dissatisfied when Director Wei is away. There was a lot of discussion. Director Wei asked me to read a book on film theory. The book is in English. Look like I'm struggling in no interest. Some enemies. He has not yet come to the company to work. A few of us chatted and laughed. Quite Livalilukui was tired because his family was heavy. Continued to write a lot of things every day in exchange for money. So I often lose my temper. Hatfilovis to look down on people. We don't like him. At the same time, I was a little afraid of him. Director Wei is here. Wei had to pretend to be concentrating on Ratingism often in a daze at the way English movies are medits as if there are faces I love all over the black and white letters. The picture is round. Picture is of my pitiful daughter Ling Ling Ling. Since that night his father carried him into the cinema and I won't get off the car until I went to my uncle's house. It's been more than a month. Never saw him again. What will happen to him now? Kanjian doesn't want me anymore. Forget me. You never want to go back to me and confess your past feelings to me. How can I forget my daughter? You don't want to go back and see them again. Miss Su, please read this script again, then make a manual. Director Wei asked me to go in and talk. He seems very dissatisfied with me doing nothing, so I came up with some work that would waste my energy. I dare not disobey. Had to try it carefully. This is easy to say, but hard to do because telling the story clearly cannot be done in just a few hundred words. I wrote the instructions and finally shortened it to the point where it could not be shortened anymore. I sent it to the director's office, but Wei Rushing was gone. It turned out that he did not really want me to write the instructions, but just asked me to do something at random. I hated him for doing nothing. After 5 o'clock that day, I left the office and decided to go see the children. I did not go to the tram station to take the tram, but walked along Meg Street. I saw a candy and bakery on the way. I stood outside the window and looked at it. After a while, I suddenly heard someone swaying behind me. Miss Su, come in with me to buy some things. I turned around, seeing that it was Tang Zuan. He had a bit of a scare on his face, but he didn't mind. He just asked me to go in and buy a stack of bread. He said this road was very quiet. No one would see us. Let's eat while walking. I refused at first, but later, because of his repeated persuasion, I became bolder. We each took a piece of bread and talked while eating. I then learned that he had 3 children. He was a good husband and a good father. I couldn't help but be more moved. Miss Su, where are you going now? I told him that I was going to ATV Lin Road to see Lingaling and Yuan Yuan. He said he lived on Dingshanfu Road. We were on the same road, so we didn't hire a car. We talked casually while walking. We felt very happy. In a blink of an eye, we were already arrived at my old house. Mr. Tang, see you tomorrow. I suddenly felt nervous. I was afraid of running into Sean. Meet the neighbors. Walking with the same man. What kind of misunderstanding would they have? Tang Zuan handed me the 8 remaining breads and said, "These are for my little sister to eat. See you later." I suddenly remembered that he was going to take them home for his children to eat, so I had to give them back to him. He insisted on not taking them back. After a while of refusing, we divided them equally. I took out 4 and gave him the rest, including the paper bag. Walking into the alley, I met a few neighbors. They all asked me in surprise, "Oh, Mrs. Zhu, you are back." I smiled bitterly and shook my head, saying that I came to see Lingaling. They all sighed and told me that Shanzi. After leaving, he wrote a letter to Encheng and borrowed his widowed aunt to live with him to take care of the child. However, his aunt was a woman with sweet words. She pretended to love the child in front of him, but often bullied Lingaling behind his back. This was known to all the neighbors. My heart seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. I walked into the old house and saw a woman in her 40s chewing wheat flour paste. When she saw me, she asked who you were looking for. I knew this was probably the so-called aunt. I said I came to see Lingaling. "Are you the great aunt?" She still seemed to be unable to figure out who I was. Finally, the old mother tattoo came out. She pouted her mouth and smiled and said, "Oh, it's Grandma. Grandma is back. Yuan Yuan and Lingaling are all thinking about us." Remember Yui asked her where the children were. She said they were all upstairs. I nodded to my aunt randomly and went straight upstairs. Mom came. The children cheered. With tears in my eyes, I gave each of them a piece of bread. I also gave one to the old mother. The old mother refused to eat it. She said she was hiding it and would give it to Yuan Yuan tomorrow. I said to the old mother, "You eat it." There is another one here. As soon as I finished speaking, my aunt also went upstairs. She stared at me coldly. It seemed that she was blaming me for running back home. It seemed that she was watching me and afraid that I would steal something. Sean was not at home. I really wanted to ask where she was, but I never asked. After playing for a while, they were going to have dinner. I said goodbye and went back. Golingling desperately pulled me to her death. She said that her mother was having dinner here. I said that my mother had something to do today. She would come to see you next time, okay? The old lady also said, let's eat before we go. The young master didn't come back today. There are some leftovers. The aunt suddenly sneered and said, the young master hasn't come back yet. Do you know for sure that he won't come back to eat tonight? Save all the food for him. The children have potato soup, roasted meat and fish. They don't have to move out. Lingling's mother, if you don't mind the lack of side dishes, please have a bowl of porridge here. I can eat wheat flour cakes by myself. I couldn't sit still after hearing this. I went straight downstairs to my uncle's house. I only heard Lingling crying and shouting upstairs and trying to catch up. The old lady was persuading her. The aunt was scolding. My heart was broken. When I returned to my uncle's house, they had already had dinner. I had no choice but to say that I had eaten out. I was hungry all night. The next day, I went to the company and saw Director Wei arrived early. He said to us with a stern face that the directors were united against him. They refused to use any script written by the screenwriter team here. They would rather write it themselves or ask old writers who were unwilling to show up to write it. In name, they only said that it was their own script and directed it. The tax was still paid to those old writers. Therefore, the company authorities had no choice. Yesterday afternoon, the company held a meeting to discuss everything. Director Wei proposed that the company must approve the scripts in the future and that they should adopt them first. The principle is to use the script written by our company. The directors all stood up to oppose it. Most of them were contemptuous and ridiculed. Manager Wang protected them. Therefore, Director Wei was angry and embarrassed. He resigned on the spot. We had to go forward and retreat with him. We resigned together. The company naturally pretended to retain him. In the end, only Lu Kui was retained. We were all unemployed. I received a month's salary. I bought 2 pieces of cloth for my aunt. She said she was one of us. Why should I be polite? But in the end, she still accepted it. It seemed that she was not very grateful or satisfied. I didn't expect that after the divorce, I would encounter professional setbacks. It's really the so-called misfortunes never come alone. The end of the year is approaching. Will I live with my relatives forever? What should I do? Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.